What's going on, you guys? This is Nate28 and this is Crossbeats Production. I gotta say thanks for tuning in and love you guys, and I really appreciate all the support and the love you guys provide this channel. And also remember to always like and subscribe. It really does help this channel. And also remember, when you do subscribe, hit that little bell button, because that'll make sure you get updates for new videos that come out and you can see what's going on with this channel. So this video is about multiband compression and the purpose of multiband compression, and more or less I wanted to show you how I've used multiband compression on this particular track to control certain parts of the low end dynamics on the track. As you can probably hear when you do hear this track, you'll hear that there's a lot of low end bass that is at some parts of the track more overwhelming than other parts, and it's really difficult to control that type of bass. I've found that, especially because there's a low end kind of a synth and also a kick that controls a lot of the low end of this track, it really was hard to kind of work around the bass, especially just using a single band compressor. So what I found was, I'll just move that out of the way, what I found was that, you know, working with this track, it kind of was hard then to just put a mastering compressor on there and just worry about the low end and let that all sorted out from there. Some tracks you can use just a single band compressor and kind of control the dynamics, but on this particular track I found that it was really difficult to do that. So what I want to do is first show you the part of the track I'm talking about, and I'll take off this compressor after I show you that, but I'll play the section of the track and just be mindful of the low end. So you might want to put some headphones on or have a really good studio setup where you've got a sub that can, you know, show you the low end on this track, because it's really low, right down at 60 hertz, kind of 50 hertz kind of stuff going on there. So let's just get to it. We'll play the track and I'll show you what it sounds like first, and then I'll explain to you exactly what I've done with this compressor and go through it from there. So let me just play it, track 0.5, let's go.
Then I realize it's in you, I must confide, Lord God. I'm not used to you cause you're odd. You're so different from the rest. When I'm around you, I'm refreshed. Next, I'm pressed to make the people stop guessing. Sure, it's a life lesson learned. Yeah, dog, you should confess him as your Lord and Savior. Give him the praise. Let him explain your ways as you change your ways. For the rest of my days, I'ma praise the name and have faith in today, cause today you say it's so authentic, the love that I have for you. More authentic, the love that you have for me. It's so real, the love that I have for you, but more real, the love that you have for me. I won't kill cause the love that I have for you, but you were killed for the love you have for me. It's so authentic, the love that I have for you, but more authentic, the love that you have for me. It's real. Part 2.
Alright, so as you can hear, there's a lot of low end with this track, and you know, trying to control that kind of low end is really difficult when especially there's a massive kick and then there's a massive bass following that. I mean, I'm assuming that, you know, with this kind of bass that there's got going on with this, there would have been some kind of side chaining to get that kind of kick in there with that bass. But anyway, that's nonetheless, that's a mixing thing anyway. So let me just show you without the compressor and show you what I'm talking about with the bass so you can just hear it, and then I'll put the compressor on and then you can hear the difference.
Then I realize it's in you, I must confide, Lord God. I'm not used to you cause you're odd. You're so different from the rest. When I'm around you, I'm refreshed. Next, I'm pressed to make the people stop guessing. Sure, it's a life lesson learned. Yeah, dog, you should confess him as your Lord and Savior. Give him the praise. Let him explain your ways as you change your ways. For the rest of my days, I'ma praise the name and have faith in today, cause today you say it's so authentic, the love that I have for you. More authentic, the love that you have for me. It's so real, the love that I have for you, but more real, the love that you have for me. I won't kill cause the love that I have for you, but you were killed for the love you have for me. It's so authentic, the love that I have for you, but more authentic, the love that you have for me. It's real. Part 2.
Alright, so if you noticed, and it's really hard to know what to look for unless you're really listening and you're used to hearing low end on tracks. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do to really check out your low end, and the things that I kind of do when I check out my low end, just to give you a tip, is putting it in mono and listening to the track in mono. Now, that's really easy. Then from when you listen to it in mono, you can hear there's just things that don't, you know, have issues with the room at that point, because the stereo track, it basically allows the room to be acoustically unstable, and it makes things bounce all over the place, basically. But when it's in mono, it's obviously more direct to you, the signal is straight in your ears, and it's just as good as basically if somebody was talking to you directly in front of you, rather than to the side of you or or vice versa. So anyway, nonetheless, I just want to show you what I did to control this. Now, first off, I'll just show you the chain of plugins that I've got going on in this particular mastering session and explain those to you briefly. So first off, that Neutron was the first one. Actually, before I get closing that, I'll show you one thing I did before that. I've used a filter here where basically a high pass filter, and it's at 29 Hertz. Now that's removing some of that really low end stuff that you just don't need on this particular track. Anyway, I don't need it because it's just overwhelming for other speakers that can't reproduce that kind of sound. And especially when it comes to limiting this track, you're going to have issues with the limiter being peaked out and maxed out because there's just too much for that limiter to control. And you'll start to lose loudness in your track as well because of that fact that the transients are hitting the limiter really quickly rather than it having more control over the transients. So that's the first thing that I put on the track. That was that. The next thing was the multiband compressor, and I've done a previous video, if you watched that, about mastering and the mastering chain and how you can work around that. So this is kind of that, I guess, that play that you can see there. So the multiband compressor I employed from there. I'll just close this off and show you the next thing. This is a free plugin if you're looking for a free plugin, and it's basically just using a compressor on the top end of the track. I'll just move that up here and I'll show you exactly what it's doing. So up here I've got no reduction in volume. It's just more or less the compressor compressing some of the signal there. I've got a shelf, and I've used that shelf all the way down to 859 Hertz, which is fairly low, but it does help control some of that top end stuff, the harshness. And I've got a fairly fast attack and a fairly fast release, and then I've put a mix and wet and dry. So some of the wet signal, some of the dry signal, it's at 65%. So this compressor is quite good for certain things. You can use it for low end as well, but I just found that it didn't have enough features for me to start playing around with the low end, to get it how I wanted it to sound. So basically that's a free plugin. Check it out. It's from Tokyo Dawn. It's called Nova. And it's a dynamic EQ, and it also does a few other things like a high pass, which you can use. It's got a pretty steep slope as well, 72, which is almost like a brick wall, and a low pass as well. So anyway, that's that. So that's the next thing I had. I had a fab filter, which I'm going to look at buying these as plugins later on. I just wanted to show you that quickly because I was trying to work around the same kind of thing with the low end with that fab filter Pro MB. And it probably works really good as if you could, get it to work. But I didn't want to use it because I don't have it, so I'd have to buy it if I had it, and then I used it. So I'll close that off. So we'll just get rid of that. Next thing I had was the mastering chain here, which is some more dynamic processing there, multi-band compressor again. It's really doing minimal stuff. Like if you saw the track, it was hardly doing anything. But again, I've got some more cutoff here, and this is further up the spectrum at 32.7. You got to be really careful, especially when you're cutting off the low end in separate occasions with EQ. You got to look out for phase issues, and you might start to suffer with that. But I didn't end up doing that with this. So some EQ going on there, and the multiband compressor. And the final compressor that I love the most for anything to do with mastering is this compressor. I'm going to do a tutorial based just on this compressor because this compressor looks very daunting, but really when you start to use it, it's so simple to use. I mean, it's just like any other compressor really, but it has a few different other features that normal compressors don't have, and you can do also mid-side processing with that as well. So that's a really cool compressor. I'm going to do a tutorial just on that, and I'll show you that on another tutorial coming up soon. Next thing here is some more processing EQ, just a bit of a strange kind of filter there I've got going on, but it works quite well. That's on the sides, by the way. That's not on the mid frequencies. This is the mid, and I've got some EQ happening here. I might just reduce that down a bit. That's definitely just helping some of that vocal stick out a bit, and some of the high-end air stuff there. And then I've got an imager right at the end. I've got this limiter, by the way, which is just controlling some of the peaks before it hits the real limiter. And then this controls the image of the stereo spectrum there. So I've got low end all the way to mono, and the rest is pretty much left alone. So that's pretty much it on the mastering chain. Then the final limiter that I've got here is set at a minus 4.8, and it's on true peak limiting on IRC1, and I've got a ceiling at 0.6 dB. So it's not too high, and that's giving me a bit of room. I might end up reducing that down a bit, but it sounded like it was quite good there and the track was breathing. So, I mean, in all essence, that's the rest of the plugins that I had there. I just wanted to show you that because, you know, obviously there's other things going on in this mix other than just the multiband compressor. But the multiband compressor, basically, I just wanted to show you how this works and explain to you briefly an understanding of it. So, like I said before, it's just a standard compressor. Just think of it as having control over different part of the stereo spectrum. So, for example, you can control up to anywhere 87 Hertz, and then I've got another set of control from 87 to 225, and then the rest from 225 upwards is controlled by another compressor. And you can control the amount of compression you use on each of these ones. You can control the attack times, release times, also the mix. And in that case, what I did to show you this and how I did it was I put a ratio of 4:1 on the bass, the real bass heavy stuff that was really controlling the low end of this track. The reason why I did that was to try and limit the peaks that were coming in. Sorry, just give me a second. So I did that to limit the peaks that were coming through, and it really just helped the rest of the bass smooth out with the rest of the kick, because I was finding that when the bass came in, you just lost the kick, it disappeared and it went to nowhere land. And it didn't come back until later on, and that to me was irritating because you want to hear both of them at the same time, and I assume that that's what the creator of this track was trying to do. They were trying to have a real thick big kick, but then also have really low end bass as well. And I love tracks like that. I'm such a massive fan of that stuff, but when it comes to mixing and mastering, it's just really difficult to get it in line. So what I've done here is, like I said, this is the first filter I've got, so it's up to 87. The next filter, like I said, it's up to 225, then the following filter. So as you can see, 4:1 ratio there. The knee is at 1. I've set it to vintage mode because it's just a little bit better. It sounds, to me, it sounds a bit, I don't know, it just sounds better. It must be the way that the compressor works and stuff like that. And plus it gives me these vintage needles. I like to watch those when it's working. As you can see,
Then I realize it's in you, I must confide, Lord.
Real minimal movement with the needles, and sometimes when you're mastering a track, you don't want a lot of stuff going on there. You just want some minimal movement and control of the dynamics. But as you can see, all the needles are kind of moving similar time.
Then I realize it's in you, I must confide, Lord God. I'm not used to you cause you're...
So I guess the thing you want to look out for there is when you're using a multiband compressor is try and control the low end, if that's the purpose of why you're using it. Try and control the top end, whatever it is. Just don't go overboard with the compressor, because when you start to, reduce too much, you're going to notice maybe even phase issues with your track. You might notice certain things are missing out of the track, the low end, the top end, whatever it might be. Try to think of it as a normal compressor, but the fact that you have more control over it, basically. And look at it in that sense, like, especially with mastering, you don't want to... I tend not to go over, say, a 2-to-1 ratio with compression. The only reason why I used the 4:1 ratio on the low end was because the dynamics of that low end were just going all over the place. I needed to control it more like a limiter. I probably could have put it at 10:1 maybe, but I didn't want to suck the entire life out of the track. I wanted to allow some of that stuff to come through. Now, focus on here with the attack and the release settings, comparing it to the rest of this compression here. How did I get these settings? Now, what I did was basically by ear. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I guess a technical point of view, I looked at the attack time of the compression that I had on the main compressor. So, for example, this compressor here, I've got it around about 36, I think it was, attack. And I looked at that and I thought, okay, so the attack time for the BPM of this track, it's 86 BPM, and the attack time that I wanted to have was around about 36 to 42. I think it was around that range. And I kind of was looking at that, and I about halved it almost, and made it allow the transient to go through, but controlled it enough where it controlled the entire length of that transient. And then what I did was increase the release time. So what that does is, if you're looking at audio in a sense of transients, say for example you're looking at a kick, and this is the kick, for example. Now what it would do, it would make out the volume of this track. Let me just close this off so you guys can see it. So I'll bring this down. So All right, so you can see it. So say for example, this is the kick right here. So that's going to make that a lot longer, and it'll make the transient. It'll probably take out some of the transient, but it will leave some of the actual kick of the transient, and then it will just increase the volume of this as it goes along. So it will hold the volume for longer, basically, and that's what the compressor is doing when I'm looking at that that attack and release setting there. So as you can see with the bass, there's not so much kick on the bass. There is some kick to it, but the transient is further up in the spectrum. So, you know, the transient somewhere in the 87 to 225 kind of mark where the real part of the kick hits, and some of that really low to mid frequencies are starting to come in. This part, you're not going to really hear it as far as the transient's concerned, but for low end on a subwoofer or low end in a club, you're definitely going to hear it, and you're definitely going to hear when it's missing. So I tried to create more of a smooth transition with that low end, and to bring it in line with the rest of the track, and especially with this real sharp transient with the kick. So that's kind of why I went with these attack and release settings in that sense. Again, you see with these, it's a bit different, so it's almost the opposite. The attack is really slow, or well, fairly slow anyway, 62 milliseconds, so it's almost 3 times the speed of the original attack for this one. And the release is a lot faster than the release on the real low-end bass, which isn't like a kick. So as you can see, I've used the advantage of having different attack settings and different release settings to allow the kick to come through and be loud and upfront, and to be even with the bass that's also coming through, which is closely up front then, and it creates an even kind of smooth signal, so all of them sound cohesive and they sound together. Here you can see the same kind of settings, 31 milliseconds, which is just a reasonable speed for attack, and a really fast release, which is about kind of similar to this release time here for the real top end stuff, but that's only really just touching the needle. It's not really doing anything. It's just to get a bit of that smoothness come through on that. So with this, I guess then the next thing you pay attention to is the mix settings here. I've put some mix settings down the bottom there, which sounded nice. That's the only way that I found it, was just playing around with it and listening to it. And when I heard the transient come through on the kick, I let the release setting stop, and obviously I set the mix to that 72.1, and that gave me the right amount. And then I just moved this per taste. It's all about taste really when it comes down to it, but pretty much all of these moves were taste at the end of the day. And it was also thinking about the track and not stealing the life out of it as well, and also controlling the low end. So this is a great compressor if you're looking at Neutron as a plugin. It's such a great plugin if you want to use it for a mixing plugin. It's great for mastering. It's great for anything you throw at it that you want to use it for, basically. It has different settings, different things you can use. It's got an exciter, transient shaper. It's got another compressor, and this compressor here, obviously I'm using that, and the EQ. EQ is quite good as well. It's a dynamic EQ, so you can use that if you wanted to control some of the low end, but in this sense I just used a compressor. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really appreciate you sticking around for this, and I'll say bye to you guys now, and peace.